the prison industry and the cradle of prison pipeline that does exist in Baltimore, Chicago, New York, Philadelphia, and it's a design to enslave the underclass in America through social economic deprivation. So we as a people, knowing that the media is portraying this and participating in this action, what is our role can we do to stop this? We got good in our community. We got good stories in our community. We got a lot of good in our communities. We just don't run around here killing, raping, and dancing at the strip club.
Who's your question for?
Whoever want to answer.
First of all, I was here some months ago, and I had a group of young debaters. And what they did, and they were incredible, because they train people, train other young people to debate public policy. They had gone on a campaign to stop, and they did succeed in stopping a youth center that was being built here.
Youth prison.
Youth prison that was being built here. On the one hand, that's citizenship in action right there. That's the kind of work. That's a step, but certainly in the sense. And they had, and at the same time, they had talked about. And I don't know how many of you know about the project itself, because one of the originators of the project is right here. But that's the kind of action we have to build. And we have to really elevate their voice within the framework of this discussion about that, because it starts there. If it's the prison industrial complex, it starts from the cradle through school, education, and to the big house. So that's where it starts, and we know that. But we have to find not only that, then we have to push those people who we elected, as James said, to be the stewards. The stewards. Whether it be the issue around the death penalty, whether it be the issue around the complex, and then connected to its real home, the failure of education. The failure of education, the building of communities, and connected even further till we talk about what do we mean by work in the 21st century? How do we define work in the 21st century? And where do we put our situation? How do we develop socially responsible work? How do we begin the work to rebuild our families, to nurture our children? How do we begin to build another relationship with teachers? Not an antagonistic relationship, but a relationship which supports the substance and the value that they bring to the table. Those are the kind of things that we could do now. So even when we do those things, we shift the discourse. We shift the dialogue.
Okay. I always think in moments like this of your question of the late extraordinary poet, black woman, lesbian, June Jordan. Many of you know the expression, "We are the ones that we've been waiting for."
Yeah.
That was June, and I happen to know June. And I raise her because I want you to rethink the summary you came through. I want you to look right behind you. And I want you to look just to your right. 50 years ago, or look who's behind these cameras. 50 years ago, none of us would have been able to come into this audience because of color. Some of us would not have been able to come in here because of religion. Some of us would not have been able to come in here because of lack of access to education to be able to run these sophisticated cameras that these young people, these young adults who are of different racial, ethnic, cultural backgrounds are running. That is called progress. What we're facing is the absolute and pervasive nature of the devastation of our communities, particularly black communities, particularly single women and children in that community, our Latino communities, our poor white communities, single women, children. It is so devastating that we often fail to recognize we are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the progress that we make. Look at this. This is progress. This is not only black and white together. This is black, white, Christian, Muslim. There are different ethnic groups in this room. And that's the pinhead of light that we must always focus on, these pinheads of light that we have created, out of which we can build a bigger open sky. So that the summary that things have not changed paralyzes us. It keeps us in an oppositional mode. It does not help us to understand our transformational capacity. Now, I do agree with the last person. We got a lot of work to do. Democracy is shrinking in this country, which means that when we express our voices of what we want and when we do it as a majority and they go off and do what they want, They take us to war, and they will be taking black young men and Latino young men and increasingly women who don't have, if you look at the prisons, it's us, black people, brown people, increasingly young black women, young brown women. So there is a lot for us to do, but we start by figuring out, how did we get in this room together? And I'm not going to go through that narrative because we all sort of have the common narrative, although we've come from different places. But we got in this room because we willed ourselves to be a mighty democratic force. And now I just think we have to look at what the targets are and what the projects are, what the key targets and key projects are.
Let me give an answer.
Just one more thing. My company, we produced a film called The House I Live In about the prison justice Congress. And if you know, in places like Nebraska and other places where they're former blue-collar workers are doing the same, the demographics are changing. Because you put people when they don't have any no place to go, they resort to another economy.
See, I think the lesson to learn from Latin America is they transformed by taking power, not by asking for change.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
The transformation was they built movements with candidates in
Right.
different ways,
Right.
in different stages.
Yeah.
They came out of, each country had its own conditions for giving rise to it. But people here have been so locked into this two-party paralysis and party machine paralysis, and it's always about nibbling around the margins.
Yeah.
So what we're going to try to do at The Real News is play a role. Like, what does mainstream news do? Mainstream news reinforces those who have power now, and it helps them think through, discuss, work out policy, even frame debate about how to maintain or fix the status quo. So we're going to do the same thing from the other side. We are going to try to work out, what would you do if you ran Baltimore in the interest of the majority of its people? What would you do if you ran Maryland in the interest of the majority of its people? Because frankly, I think the city council here is very weak in terms of how, there is no participatory, hang on a second. The average city councilor gets elected with about 1,500 votes. And as you know, in the primaries, 18% of people voted. In the election, only 13% voted. And for good reason. There's nothing to inspire you to vote. So winning the election here is not the problem. The problem is, what do you do if you win? So we're going to try to help frame that and answer the question from whether it's the public school system or whether it's the, there obviously is a problem with drugs, and it's obvious to anyone that looks that the war on drugs helps spread drugs. Everyone knows that if you look at any of the evidence. Everyone knows that more policing doesn't solve any of the problem, but the debate is always framed around more policing. So we're going to use these town halls to try to play our role, but in the final analysis, the people of Baltimore have to have a movement with candidates, and they have to focus on power.
Right.
Otherwise, you're just going to ask for another 500 years. I mean, I agree there's been progress, but that progress didn't come from asking.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead. No, I'd give somebody else a chance here. Give somebody else a chance. Who else is going to go ahead. Yeah.
Sisters here.
Oh, no, I was pointing up here, but go ahead, Margaret. But I was pointing in the front row here. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just quickly then, I mean, speak to the democracy, I mean, we don't actually, we have a rigged system in here. It's a mirage democracy where we don't really get to choose who we want to vote for. They're chosen for us, and then we say yes or no. But my question, which I think is a fundamental question to what we're discussing about the media, is do we really need to spend any energy going after the mass media when we know, just like the oligarchic media in Venezuela, they're never going to be our friend? Or do we put our time into doing, as you're doing, building our own media? We've seen recent examples where there have been intentional media blackouts of important information, and yet the citizens' media has been able to overcome those blackouts. When they came out with a State Department review of the Keystone XL pipeline and buried it on a Friday of a holiday weekend, that still came out. When, for years they've been negotiating a secret trade agreement, one of the largest ones in a long time, and made that a complete media blackout. We overcame that through our own media. So I'd just like to get your feedback on.
I got a suggestion. Can I get
few,
I want to get a few
few
comments going, and then we'll kind of
Yeah.
react. So you had something in the front row and something over here, I think.
Okay, what I wanted to say is kind of taking part of what the brother was saying. I look at the head of things, okay? We're kind of talking about the belly of things, of the problems that's going on with women, men getting incarcerated. What I see, because I had my children in public school, now they're in private school. I took them out of there, okay? And what I see is that there's a lot of police around there. There's also incarceration there, which they call detention. Once the kids are like 9 years old, they go in detention. By the time they get 10, detention really does not help them because they're not helping them with their education. So as a teacher, you would know, okay, the child's giving you a problem in class. When they're in detention, you put somebody there to help them with that. They're taken away, and by the time they turn 15, they're in the system. So, and they have no way, even if they had the heart to change their lives because of their past experience of being locked up or whatever, they don't have a chance. They don't give them that chance, even when they get incarcerated. So that makes them become more criminal because now they're thinking, there's nothing for me. I don't have a chance. I'm this black man, Hispanic, whatever, and I don't have that chance. Education-wise as well, they come to school every day because they have nowhere to go. When they go to school, I know an 18-year-old brother that graduated from high school, but he cannot get a decent job because he doesn't speak well, okay? And I remember years ago that, what's that language they be speaking? That they have dictionaries for that, Ebonics. Who's gonna hire you with Ebonics? Like you say, the high class areas have more pull with things. They have executive days where people from all class comes and try to motivate them with a career. Community centers are being shut down. Summertime is coming. What they gonna do? They're gonna get frustrated, break windows, break people's cars, all kinds of crazy stuff because there's no tool, nothing for them to go. If they need to go to some type of trips or camping, we're poor people. How are we gonna pay $300 something and we have 5-6 children? We can't afford it. And then we have to worry about this high rent. The parents probably on drugs themselves, or something going on with them because of the way the system is working, so they don't have it.
Right.
I just wanted to put that
I'm sure a lot of people felt what you're expressing. Who else wants to say something? Oh, you had your hand up a long time there.
Are there segments of Venezuela that are following the economic justice movements in Spain?
In Spain?
In Catalan section of Spain.
Okay, I thought okay.
Did you know?
I'm sorry.
Are there the economic justice movement in Catalonia? Is this people in Venezuela following it? I don't know if you guys know.
Yeah,
this.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay, who else we got?
Interesting discussion, and it's really wonderful to hear. You were just in Venezuela. And there's so much going on there. My question is, how we're talking about independent media, and I know that independent media speaks far more to the truth, to our truth, than mainstream media does. But my question is, how do we court the independent media? Do they come to us? How do we get that story out there? The stories that we've just heard, all of this. All of the corruption, everything that we're talking about. How do we get that story to the people that need to hear that story? I know that here, Real News Network is committed to working in Baltimore City and trying to fix that, but that doesn't at all address the global level at which this discussion has reached today. And so how do we do that? How do we do that?
Should we take these now?
Yeah, let's see what else we got. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, Lawrence up here. Yeah.
Kind of piggybacking off of that, I had a question about the narratives of how change happens. And I have a very academic upbringing, but I've been doing more activist work here in Baltimore. And an activist named Dominique Stevens, who does great work with formerly incarcerated people, has a quote from Ella Baker that she repeats: "Strong people don't need strong leaders." So tying that into Venezuela, a socialist documentary talked about the narrative we get is either Chavez is a dictator but it's all about Chavez, not about the people and the people producing Chavez, and Chavez being a part of things like the communal councils and the citizens' assemblies and things like that. So I guess my question is, do you see parallels to the way the media constructs a narrative of leadership in Venezuela and a parallel to here in America? And given that so many leaders seem to be produced by the media, I see Leopoldo Lopez in Venezuela, and I can't help but think Cory Booker, for example, right? So given that, should we try to have more nuanced understandings of leadership and its positive potential, or should we just sort of try to get beyond this idea of leadership, because strong people don't need strong leaders?
Okay, you guys want to go with that?
Go ahead.
We want to try to get to all of the questions and observations that have been made, but I think this point probably is a kind of axis that ties all of this together. A very, very important point. We can be all leaders. We are all leaders in very pedestrian, everyday things. No one tells us what time to get up. We turn on the clock, or you know, we figure out how we're going to do that. The question is, can we take that agency, that self-initiative, and turn it into bigger life-qualifying issues, like who we want to vote for and why, and under what conditions we will work with them. I think your point is absolutely correct. I was just looking at an article earlier today. One of the problems Latin America is facing with the strong leader is the issue of secession. You know, who will follow? Now, no one paid any attention to somebody called Raul Castro, and unfortunately, nobody pays a lot of attention to him now, even as he, in a very systematic way, is working with the Cuban people, first to put a mirror before their face, and they're criticizing themselves about every imaginable thing, including their very vaunted healthcare system that everybody recognizes. There is a big debate about public policy and issues of racism in socialist Cuba. Cuba has a huge debate about homosexuality, and with a first transgendered elected official, because they have looked at their problems, this strong leadership, this over-centralization in their central committee, and said, here's the irony. We have, by analysis of the United Nations, some of the most educated people in the world. Our kids are scoring higher than the major countries in math, science, and technologies. We are one of the leading biotechnology countries in the world, this little country of 11 million people in a world of 7 billion people. Why aren't we producing anything? The late Sal Landau, who Danny worked very much with, a filmmaker, an activist, said Cubans don't produce anything, but they're one of the most educated people in the world. So they've changed their construct, including you cannot be president of Cuba more than 8 years. I don't think there's anything magic about 8 or 7 or 4 or 2 or 9 or 10, but the real issues are how to not become ossified, reified, stale, stagnant, overly self-indulged, and how you spread out the notion of leadership. Let me just quickly, before going to Danny on the question of mass public space media versus social media. I think we have to do both.
Yeah.
The problem with mass media, as we all know, is whose interest is it in, and they use their lens to determine what they want to project about us and about what they think society should be. But they have one advantage over us. We are socialized to turn on that television, to turn on those radios. And that is where the mass issue of the mediation of good, truth, and beautiful is going on. And we cannot abandon that under my view of romantic notions of localism. Now, I'm a troglodyte, one of these people that doesn't understand modern technology, so I don't know what Twitter is and Facebook. And I'm self-critical. I say it laughingly, but I am self-critical because my 38-year-old son and my 35-year-old son, somebody stopped my wife and I in a store the other day and said, "Oh, I know you." And I turned to her right away. I said, they saw us on one of our children's Facebook page, but we don't have it. But the issue there is that there are 300 million people in this country think of how many social media stories are going on that you don't have a clue about in your own household, not to mention your neighborhood, your city, or the country. So it's not that those are bad things, but how do we use both of them to get into this big public space, which media is a public forum? Good or bad, it convenes us. And there we have to get into the battle of ideas and virtues about what is good, truth, and beautiful. And we have to use our little tributaries called social media at the same time. So I don't think it's an either-or situation. Lastly, on the issue, I was just thinking about the children.
But go ahead. Go ahead. You. I can't add to anything you're saying. Go ahead.
I was just thinking of an experience that Danny and I had. We were taken to Valle Coche.
Valle Coche, yeah.
And there are these containers, these, what do you call them?
Shipping containers that you find,
and this is a community of young hip-hop artists and dancers and videographers who come from some of the roughest neighborhoods. They convene young people from all over the country in reciprocal exchanges of what they're learning, how they're expressing themselves. That's one of those pinheads of light of young people who are coming out of prison, or old people who are coming out of prison for that matter. We need to look at where are the best case scenarios. They're small, they don't yet meet the scale of need but if we don't know where those advances are, we don't know how to sew ourselves together. And we tend then to look out at how stark the problem is, rather than where are the pinheads of light that we, the people, are creating. And then how do we connect those pinheads of light is what I think we have to do. So Baltimore, I'm sure, has a number of rich examples of delinquency centers, brutality, all kinds of things where positive results are going on. And we need to find one another. And that is how we build community. And that is how we get those people back into the civic space, back into who will be our elected officials and what conditions we will put them in and how we engage them on a daily basis. So I'll stop on this point. If we come back to Baltimore in a few months and the Real News is here and this site here is empty, then the Real News has not failed. We have failed. We haven't failed the Real News. We will have failed ourselves of utilizing this as we use.
Well, first of all, that isn't going to happen.
You know, so, just as we use, our mosque, our synagogue.
That's not even a discussion.